All right, so today we're going to get into the absolutely wild 50-year story of the band Foreigner. And trust me, it's a real roller coaster. We're talking about a brilliant musical partnership, a nasty conflict that completely ripped it apart, and then finally this long, long road back to making peace. So it really all kicks off with this kind of paradox, right? How in the world does a band named Foreigner, a band whose name literally means outsider, somehow become one of the most defining voices of American rock? Well, the whole secret, it turns out, is in their unique transatlantic DNA. Okay, first up, the transatlantic blueprint. See, that unique DNA, it wasn't an accident. Nope, it was meticulously designed by one guy, the band's founder, this visionary English guitarist named Mick Jones. He wasn't just, throwing a band together. He was following a very specific plan. And when I say he had a plan, I mean it. Just look at this guy's resume before Foreigner even existed. Mick Jones was no rookie. He was a total pro. He'd cut his teeth playing rock and roll with Nero and the Gladiators. He was the musical director for the French Elvis, a guy named Johnny Holiday. We're talking huge productions here. He'd even already broken into the US market touring with Smoky Tooth. So by the time 1975 rolled around and his gig with the Leslie West Band fizzled out, Jones knew exactly what he wanted. No more compromises. He wanted total creative control to build a rock supergroup that could conquer the world. So he got to work. He started putting together this killer lineup in New York City, a mix of British and American talent. But there was one thing missing, the most important piece of the puzzle, the lead singer. And he was not going to settle. He auditioned singer after singer looking for that one-in-a-million voice with a perfect mix of soul and pure rock power. How many did he listen to? 50. Almost 50 singers. And then, finally, he found him. It's a great story, actually. Jones remembered this old demo tape he'd been handed years before from some singer in a band out of Rochester, New York. And that singer was Lou Gramm. With Graham's incredible voice, the band was finally complete. And that's when Jones came up with the perfect name. Foreigner. Why? Because it perfectly summed them up. You had 3 Englishmen and 3 Americans. So think about it. No matter what country they played in, half the band would always be, well, foreigners. Brilliant. So next up, an arena rock ascent. Because once that blueprint was complete, once all the pieces were in place, man, their rise to the top wasn't just fast, it was absolutely explosive. That careful formula Jones put together, it worked better than anyone could have possibly imagined. And you don't have to take my word for it. The numbers are just insane. Their first album in 1977 goes 5 times platinum and stays in the top 20 for a whole year. A whole year! Then, just 1 year later, they drop Double Vision, and it does even better. It hits number 3, goes 7 times platinum, and basically just lives in the top 10. They literally went from playing theaters to headlining massive arenas practically overnight. But you know how it goes. With that kind of crazy success, friction starts to build. Mick Jones, always the architect, decides he needs to streamline the band. First to go is the bassist, Ed Gagliardi. But then, in 1980, he and Lou Gramm make this massive move. They fire 2 of the founding members, Ian MacDonald and Al Greenwood. Just like that, the original 6-piece band is down to a 4-piece. And what that really did was put all the creative power, the whole direction of the band, squarely into the hands of the 2 guys at the center of it all, Jones and Gramm. And that brings us to the next chapter, the songwriting schism. See, that partnership, Jones and Gramm, it would go on to create some of the absolute biggest anthems of the 1980s. But here's the crazy irony. Their single biggest hit, the most successful song they ever wrote, would become the very thing that destroyed their relationship for good. Okay, so the year is 1984. Foreigner releases a song called I Want to Know What Love Is. It becomes their only #1 hit, and it's a monster, a global phenomenon. But behind all that success, a huge fight was brewing. Mick Jones insisted on a 95-5 split on the songwriting royalties. 95% for him, 5% for Lou Gramm. You have to understand, this wasn't just about the money. For Gramm, it felt like Jones was basically saying his creative input was worth almost nothing. Now, Lou Gramm, he eventually just gave in. He was so frustrated, he just signed it. But in his own words, looking back, he said that moment, it was the beginning of the end. That was it. The trust was shattered. After that, they started drifting apart, and it really set the stage for him leaving the band for the first time in 1990. All right, our next section is called Crisis and Survival. Because even though the band did get back together in the mid-90s, their problems were far from over. In fact, What came next was easily the most difficult, most harrowing chapter in their entire story. It was a time of career struggles that ended in a truly devastating personal crisis. So in early 1997, Lou Gramm gets this diagnosis, a rare type of brain tumor. And this timeline here, it just lays out the unbelievable ordeal he went through. There's the diagnosis, a life-saving but incredibly long and difficult surgery, and then a brutal recovery. And get this, he was being pressured by the band's management to go back on tour just 2 months after surgery because they didn't want to cancel shows. All that strain, it was just too much, and it's what finally led to him leaving Foreigner for good in 2003. And just to really understand how serious this was, before he found a surgeon who could help, multiple doctors told Lou Gramm that his tumor was inoperable. They basically told him to go home and get his affairs in order. But he didn't give up. He eventually found a doctor in Boston who was pioneering a new kind of laser surgery. And that procedure, it saved his life. But it took 19 hours, a grueling 19-hour surgery. And if the surgery wasn't bad enough, the recovery was just as brutal. He was on these massive doses of steroids, and his weight literally doubled. He went from 145 pounds to almost 290. On top of that, he was dealing with severe memory loss. I mean, he had to tape the lyrics of his own songs to the stage floor just to make it through a concert. It was an absolutely torturous time for him, physically and professionally. But you know what? The story doesn't end in that dark place. The final chapter, this one's called Hallowed Ground, Final Piece. And it's all about resilience, getting the recognition they deserved for so long, and finally, a reconciliation that was so hard-won. After years, I mean years, of being one of the most successful bands on the planet not to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, in 2024, it finally happened. Foreigner got inducted. And this huge public moment, this validation, it became the thing that finally started to heal all those decades-old wounds. And here's what Lou Gramm had to say about it. He said the honor just made him realize that, quote, holding on to a grudge is a complete and absolute waste of time and energy. And that was it. That was the final push he needed, to just let it all go. He reached out to Mick, and for the first time in what felt like forever, they were actually talking again. And right around that same time, Mick Jones shared some deeply personal news of his own. He revealed that he'd been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease a few years back, and that's the real reason he'd had to step away from touring with the band. So you have this incredible moment where these two guys, these former partners who had been through everything together, were now both facing these incredibly serious health battles. And all of this, it brings us to one last question to think about. When you look back on a band like Foreigner, what really, truly defines their legacy? Is it just the incredible string of hit songs? Is it the bitter conflict that tore them apart for so long? Or is it maybe the peace they finally found with each other, standing on that hallowed ground together, almost 50 years after the whole wild ride began?